Boa tarde. Primeiro eu vou me introduzir em português, porque eu sou brasileira. Mas eu vou ter que desculpar porque eu vou falar em inglês, porque o meu projeto todo foi feito em inglês. Mas é um prazer estar apresentando, porque é a primeira vez que eu apresento meu projeto aqui no Brasil. Então é uma emoção, assim, estar aqui falando para vocês, né? So I just introduce everyone to myself. My name is Tatiana. I will present my master's and my PhD. There's a very deep connection to Brazil. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to turn it off because it's repeating.
Só desculpa.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So kia ora. Thank you for being here. This project has a very strong connection to myself and to my country. And what I'm going to talk here today is a little bit of a journey and how I started in New Zealand. I've been in New Zealand for 20 years. So I pretty much almost half of my life in New Zealand. So it's a really, really deep connection I have with the country. And I think going to New Zealand was also a place where I was able to connect with my own culture. And this is a project where not only I found my connection to my culture, but also to my own practice, what I wanted to do as a designer. I am a designer. I work in a design practice for around 15 years. And I developed my illustration practice in New Zealand. And also I found I was a storyteller. And through doing and making stories, I also became an educator. I teach at AUT for about 7 or 8 years. And this, become part of myself too. And a lot of my work has these 5 fundamental principles. I do work with Brazilian culture. My projects usually involve narrative and motif. Most recently, I've been working a lot with technology and also collaboration. I started a little bit with my master's because from my master's, I think was a very good connection with my PhD. I started my master's feeling a little bit like an intellectual refugee, like Valby said. I had a really difficult time. I was feeling really homesick, and from this feeling of feeling really, really homesick, I decided to write a story. And the story was creating a connection between Carnival and my migration to New Zealand. And this story talks about my personal experience, my cultural disconnection, and how lost I was at that point about where to belong. I came to Brazil about that time, and I was in Carnival, and at that point when I came back, this was like 10 years ago, I really found a strong connection with my culture. And that's when Carnival Land started. It was a story of transformation, a story of my transformation. It's about dreams, about desires, and those dreams are costumes and annual Carnival parade. This story is not a happy story. Although you can see there's very colorful images, and there's pages of the picture book. The story is a very sad story. She gets exploited and she gets rejected when she's trying to find herself. And I took photographs of myself, you can see. and I also talk about people that helped me during that journey. And until the end of the story where I was able to find that home was in my heart. From that story, I took some time away. I spent 4 years teaching at an institution that is actually part of Laureate as well, and I came back to do my doctoral philosophy. And that's when Sense of Paradox kind of emerged as a way of expanding storytelling and using of technology. Carnival Land is an AR picture book, so you can access the story using a mobile device or iPad, and when you scan those images, you will be able to see 3 versions of the story. And those stories are told by 3 different narrators: the mother of benevolence, the father of orthodoxy, and the father of pragmatism. They tell very distinct versions of the story based on the perception of who they are, but those stories are complementary as well. And just a little bit of a video so you can see how it works.
Euclides was destined to be a martyr.
Euclides and Elsa were young and full of ideas.
Euclides and Elsa were young and fighters for freedom. His photograph shattered on the floor.
I would like to tell you a story of faith.
There is original sin, and God never forgets.
There is good and evil in this world. Both are necessary.
The app is fully functioning, and you can access the app and study by the images. You can read the entire story, but the baseline of the story is basically starts in the past when this main character, it's young, and we experienced this story by observing her in her room for about 50 years. Her partner disappears in the Brazilian coup. So the story starts in the 60s, 1964, and the story goes about 50 years when she's old. And she lives on this room of accumulated memories, and she is very religious, but also on the verge of madness. So when you experience the story, you see very distinct perspectives of what she experienced on that room. And the work is also parallax, so when you scan, the image is constructed to give a perception of a 3D space. And also those saints are sitting in her room watching her. So the reference is based on Brazilian syncretism, it's based on specific forms of syncretic religion. And this is also the way the image is constructed. So the use of collage and photomontage refers also to this concept of syncretism. So you can see I'm going to place 3 versions of that story, or one of the stories.
Passion and warmth disappeared with Euclides. Elsa searched for him relentlessly, but like others before him, he had disappeared without trace. Time fell limp like a wilted flower, and her pain deepened.
She comforted herself with small sacrileges, wallowing in guilt. She built idols to his memory and fashioned herself a martyr.
In her grief, perhaps, Elsa went mad. It is not uncommon in such circumstances. She closed her room to the world, another aging woman tormented by the disappearance of someone she loved. In her fragile way, she sought to suspend time.
life is actually what I call vacant set. So when you see the printed image on the book, there you don't see anything, like you don't see the characters, but when you scan the pages, presents three different ways of, three variations, but this is also variations in color, iconography, and the situations that happen there on those pages, and according to each of the narrators. So just to show one of the images, and I decided to put this image because I took photographs of my hometown. I live on the east side of São Paulo. So some of these images are here were referring to where I was from. And even the river was a very kind of emulation of the kind of Tiesi river. So I think that this kind of represents a little bit of how iconography was very important for me when I was constructing the work. This is one of the same, so you can see how the construction of the work is very similar but changes. So the position of the objects are always in the same place, but the little elements of those images change. And this is the mother of benevolence. And this is the father of realism. So this was very demanding construction using photography that I used also when I was traveling in Brazil, and also looking at reconnecting with this culture from being far away. And so the work works as a parallel, a hypertext, so you can read the pages vertically, diagonally, or horizontally, and they should work independently or in connection to understand the full picture of the story. In total, it's around 10 pages, so you basically have 30 variations of the story. And the book is constructed as a concertina that gives a sense of kind of a theatrical physicality of the book. So just really quickly, some of the contextual areas that inform this work. The structure of the narrative draws heavily in the fictional narratology, literature, the concepts around realismo maravilhoso, and how syncretism and photomontage could use in correlation in the construction of the images and in reference to also the iconography. The structure of the work follows the polyvocal discourse, and also how there's multiple voices can subvert this idea of a single narrative, or also more like a post-colonial questioning of what is absolute and what is the real story. And also that is a reference to syncretism as a cultural reference to Brazilian culture and religion, and an artistic and narrative device. Research design, I use post-positivist paradigm, which is basically the researcher that can influence what is observed in the construction of the work. It's a practice-led research, and also heuristic inquiry. A lot of my practice was dedicated to understand the story, to understand the construction of the story, and also how I placed myself in the world of Elsa. Well, Elsa is the main character, and how I was able to view her, and how I was able to feel the experience of being inside her room and feel what she felt. So this was very important for me when I was constructing this story, and specifically, by the way, there were many, many methods initially how I ideate the story, through journaling and through creating lots of prototypes, but also how I use collaboration and feedback to construct the work. The initial stage, where you can see on the diagram, I took lots of photographs. I came to Brazil many times. I went traveling. I went traveling with my mom. And we went to Minas Gerais, São Paulo. And a lot of the photographic work was about me understanding iconography and understanding, like, to relate back to my culture as well. And this is one of the photos I took in Minas Gerais when I went to the historical towns. And that's when I drove from the idea of the photograph. And by the way, people placing all those photos in churches and etc. Yeah, so this is also around my hometown. and also walking on those colonial towns that kind of inform a little bit of the iconography of my work. Yeah, and I visit a lot of Umbanda Center. My sister is from Umbanda, and I went visiting and participated in a lot of ceremonies as well. Yeah, some image of saints I took. Part of my process also to do is sketching and journaling and writing a lot what comes to my mind and writing storyboards. I have about 5 to 10 journals, which I love. I should be doing more, but I really love the fact of just capturing my ideas and my sketching. And also one of the things I found was very interesting for me is that I draw Elsa's room, and I lived there for a while. I wanted to understand how she lived on that space and how the angles of my images were projected in certain places. So initially I thought about creating Elsa as a normal apartment, and later I decided she actually lived on the theater. So the way I saw her was more very theatricized, so this was more like a theater space. Yeah, and the assembly of the work was very demanding. I work with photo montage and also video. I video all my work. Oh, what happened? Oh yeah. Okay, sorry about this. But I work with a lot of people, especially towards the end of the project. Oh yeah. Where I filmed everything in green screen, and I had the help of many people at that time, and using the green screen, the DOP, and the costume designer. So I think that especially in the construction of AR technology, I have faced a lot of challenges in constructing this on the game engine. No, I saw which one. Bye. Yeah, yeah. No, go. It must be really big images. Yeah, it's with the green screen after that one. Yeah, it's something going. Yeah. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it can look like this. It's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah, I think I just wanted to finish saying what were the contributions. I think this project finished about 5 years ago. So I think it was really interesting for me to reflect on certain contributions. And one of the contributions is the practice polyvocality and how to tell a story and with multiple voices and how to incorporate it into an interactive narrative and how you can expand this using a printed book using AR. Also, how to explore the potential of realism maravilhoso, magical realism, as a form of cultural, distinctive story that uses transcultural and decolonial forms of telling stories. Also, how parallax, which is usually mostly a technical device, was used as a conceptual device, and also how syncretism as a cultural element of Brazilian culture was used into artistic mode. So I wanted to finish by saying how important stories became for me, and how, for me, stories are art, and how I use this Nigerian poet because I really like what he says in the way that stories is where high realms of creativity reside. And for me, I think being in New Zealand was a way of reconnecting with my practice and who I am as a designer. So yeah, thank you. Obrigada.
Perguntas para a Tatiana? Any questions for Tatiana?
Eu posso?
Pode.
Oi, Tatiana, boa tarde.
Olá, André.
Eu já tinha visto algumas coisas do seu trabalho, talvez em outros links, né? E eu sempre gosto muito, acho muito bonito, e tem uma coisa interessante porque tem uma solidez também nessa pesquisa criativa que se desenvolve, né? Acho que tem, a gente percebe bem, né? Um mergulho tanto na parte conceitual quanto nessa parte artística mesmo, estética. Eu fiquei curiosa, eu pesquiso literatura digital, mas eu discuto com o grupo com que eu pesquiso que essa nomenclatura ela é muito forte, por exemplo, nos Estados Unidos, um pouco na Inglaterra, na França, mas não em outros lugares do mundo. Eu tinha uma curiosidade de saber se você considera que isso seria literatura digital, se você acha que dialoga com isso ou não.
Do I answer in Portuguese or in English? I'm not sure.
Português.
In English. In English. Okay, that's good. Okay, cool. Yeah. My work is very linear. I think the way I constructed the work was actually from the perspective that I am a picture book designer. So I think that for me to use technology is because I felt the picture book was limiting the perspective of telling a story through different perspectives. So I didn't come to think about using digital literature, but it happened to be a very strong conceptual idea to push this magical real story, but also to be able to tell versions of the story at the same time. I think it is, perhaps, can be inside this digital world, but I also like the way that can be bridging the physical. And because I think the picture book is still very present on this work, so yeah, I don't know, I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Aí eu vou inverter a ordem aqui, que eu acho que tem a ver com a pergunta do professor Andréia. Meu nome é Alessandra e ela é doutoranda em design. Uma pesquisa recente mostrou que o Brasil perdeu quase 7 milhões de leitores nos últimos 4 anos. Em sua opinião, por que os formatos digitais interativos de livro ainda não decolaram? Você acredita que esse formato de obra pode ajudar a reverter esse quadro de perda de leitores e, eventualmente, reconquistar uma nova geração de leitores? E aí ela pergunta aqui no fim se poderia repetir onde pode encontrar a sua obra e se é possível ler a sua tese de doutorado também.
I think so. I think that all the different ways in which literature can be explored are beneficial for, especially for visual projects. So I don't have an answer if this is going to help or not. But I think one of the ways I saw in relation to my work is to push the boundaries of printer technology and digital technology as well. So I think that absolutely. And if she wants to see my work, I do have on AUT website. But the work is not necessarily published because it's quite expensive to. But I do have a website that can be accessed as well. You know. Yeah. Sergio? I don't know if I answered the question.
Não, uma outra bem rápida aqui. Sou Amanda, sou uma designer gráfica, trabalho numa agência de publicidade. Gostei muito da sua apresentação, me desculpe, deu muita inveja. No meu trabalho, minha criatividade é muito limitada ao que me mandam fazer. Percebi que seu trabalho foi utilizado... Está muito rápido. Percebi que o seu trabalho foi utilizado como uma forma de encontrar sua voz e sua identidade. O que você sugere para uma pessoa presa em sua própria vida e que gostaria de seguir um caminho parecido com o seu?
I worked as a designer here in São Paulo for about 7 years. So I understand how it is to work in a commercial environment. And I always tell my students that I think it's very important to have your personal practice. And it's hard because many times you work for companies and not always you have the opportunity to do that. And my way of doing was that I wanted to do a practice-led research. And the reason why I came to Aotearoa was my supervisor, and he took me under his wing on my master's because I was actually quite lost on my creative practice. I had worked for many years as a designer. I worked in branding, packaging, and I kind of didn't know what I wanted to say. So I think stories became a vehicle for me to exercise my voice. And that's how I found. I could only speak about myself, and that was the way I found to actually connect with my practice. Yeah.
Obrigado.
Okay.